Maria followed the drag tracks deeper into the forest. She was careful not to make any noise. Despite the fortune teller leaving the woods were still quiet. Something wasn't right here. If it wasn't the fortune teller that was causing the silence, then it was something else entirely. Likely the same thing that kidnapped Sochi and Michikoto. But what would have the ability to kidnap them both? Maria knew that her thoughts on that subject could be helpful or unhelpful, so she decided to focus on what she could see. The drag trail, without any obvious signs of a struggle, meant that the two of them were incapacitated before being taken. Probably by chemical means, since force wouldn't work on Sochi, and psychic means wouldn't work for similar reasons. Somehow, as Maria followed the trail, it got even quieter. Her heartbeat, her steps, and even when she snapped her fingers next to her ears, all of it couldn't be heard at all. But sure enough, the trail led to a cliff face, and before the cliff was a large fire burning. Something burned in the fire that smelled like burnt pork. Something Maria didn't want to identify. And tied to the cliff face was both Michikoto and Sochi. Both were chained in dark metal chains that resembled the bone steel used in Caligula's Carnival. The steel was made with the bones of those who lost them at the tables of the Carnival. Very durable, very esoteric. Maria was about to run over to them, but not before she saw the rest of the camp. Set by the fire and across from Michikoto and Sochi was a large, flat stone shaped almost like a table. On the table were bloody handprints and more of the fortune teller's corruption. It stank, and Maria could see that standing across from the camp, staring her down, was a very tall figure. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, and he was built like an old-fashioned Brewster from the 2600s. Large bare arms and a chest broad enough to push, or stop, a train. He wore a brightly colored outfit that was purple, and despite its weird color, it was cut like the Emperor's suit, minus the arms. But where the Emperor of the Seven Cities would only have a single splash of purple for his rank, this mockery would wear all purple. That was neat, despite all the blood and dirt in the wilderness. He was bald, but he wore a large double-pointed cap that was curved like horns, curved into the sky, with bells of bone on the points that jingled with his movements. But it was his face that was the most disturbing part of him. Like many others of his profession, he wore a mask made to mock mortal expression. It was almost like a harlequin mask, except harlequin masks didn't cover the entire face, with a mouth that had no teeth, and that moved with the unseen mouth underneath. Most harlequin masks also weren't bronze and bolted onto the face of the performer, with screws that leaked black blood that caused the ground to hiss and sizzle wherever it touched. And unique to this clown was also 2 bright red handprints on this mask's cheeks. Maria felt only a stab of panic in her heart when she saw his face, and the connection was made in her mind. The one who helped the fortune teller escape wasn't a guest. It was a clown. That's why the clown catcher didn't return. One of Caligula's enforcers, the stupidest clown in front of her, was tempted to change his fate, and now stood before her, knowing his future and with the power to change his own fate. "Well, took you long enough to arrive. Looks like you arrived." The clown checked his wrist that held no watch. "Just on time, so I'm sure you would prefer to just end it quickly. I will just tell you now, you cannot kill me, but you'll still try to prove me wrong," the clown said, just as Maria lifted her rifle to her shoulder, aiming it at the clown's chest. "See, what did I tell you? Well, let's make this easy," the clown said, removing from his jacket pocket a large paper target with a heart in the middle as he held it in front of his chest. Shoot the heart, win a prize. Everyone's a winner, he said just as Maria squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked her in the shoulder, and the silence of the woods were met with a loud bang, while fire belched from the barrel. The target in the clown's hands tore right through the heart, and the clown dropped to his knees and grabbed at his chest. "Oh no, what irony, what misfortune, that you were able to shoot me exactly like I said. But you broke fate, saying I cannot die by doing exactly what fate dictated you did. What a poetic prize for our heroine," the clown said as he curled up, groaning loudly and dramatically, before he laid back on his bent knees and threw his arms up, throwing a large explosion of confetti and glitter. He then stood up with ease, his suit not even messed up and no glitter or dirt on his suit. "Oh, I guess you missed my heart. Well, maybe next time take me to dinner first if you want to catch my heart. I hear the best way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and I am quite hungry." After he finished his last line, his long snake-like tongue left his harlequin lips and licked his entire bronze face before slithering back into his mouth again. "What are you?" Maria asked him. The clown responded with a snap of his fingers as he disappeared into smoke, as 3 other clouds of smoke appeared around the camp. Maria glanced at the clouds, expecting him to appear from one of them. Instead, the smoke cleared and he didn't appear, at least until she heard him whisper behind her ear, almost making her jump, but she stood still and calm. "My name is Chuckle Buster, formerly chief enforcer of the plutocrats of Caligula's Carnival of Cannibalistic Carnage. Nowadays, I consider myself more freelance," Buster said as he stepped around Maria, his mask going from a smile to a dramatic sad face. So she didn't react the way he expected her to act. That would have to be noted. He's supposed to be able to see all of his futures, but maybe he couldn't see everything. "Why didn't it work?" Maria asked, which brought the smile back to the bronze face. "Why? Do you want to try again?" he asked, grabbing her rifle and pressing it against her temple. Maria was tempted to pull the trigger again, but she was smart enough to know that wouldn't work. But it would work as a different type of test. He was expecting her to try again, and she could just refuse to see if he did. To see if he did predict her actions, or just what he believes her actions to be. The contract with Caligula's Carnival states that judgment cannot take you until such time that your work with Caligula ends. Most clowns don't bother trying to stop damage because it cannot stop them. So, why did you bother to stop the bullet? Maria asked Buster, who tilted his head, but answered. Yes, he was someone who would rather explain himself than just kill her quickly. He probably spent centuries being told to maim, break, and kill without any reason, and without a single person asking him for his thoughts. Now he finally had an audience for his thoughts. Well, our contract also says we serve the carnival with all of our heart. When there's no more heart to serve the carnival, our contract is null, and the void comes to claim us. But the fortune teller has given me a brand new power. I just had to feed slapstick to him. Then the fortune teller showed me how I was able to escape without being missed. How I can finally change my face from just an enforcer to where I'm free. You showed me every version of my future and how to control them all, Buster said as he lifted his hands to the bloody handprints on his cheeks. You showed me how the other two were a threat to me, but you were nothing. There's no version of any future where you could even hurt me. You weren't worth knocking out with a smoke bomb. So I will keep living on and on and on. And the carnival will never be able to take me out, he said, spinning in place, as he pointed to where Michikotl and Sochi hung from the cliff face. The fortune teller crawled towards Sochi. One bleeding hand held a knife, while the other held the remaining eye that glanced towards them both. Maria held her rifle up and aimed at the fortune teller, while Buster sighed. You know that won't work, he said as Maria pulled the trigger again. This time confetti fired out of the rifle barrel. She wasn't sure what he did to change her SIR, but now her rifle wasn't going to help. She prepared to run towards her until she saw that the fortune teller was hanging his knife over Sochi's stomach. You won't make it there in time, he said as Maria stood stock still, waiting for her opportunity. Buster was clearly expecting her to be frozen in fear, not realizing that she was just waiting for her opportunity. Maria stood there, letting the rifle barrel fall to the dirt, giving the impression to Buster that she was giving up. And sure enough, from the way his mask smiled and the way he moved, like he was a performer who made his audience laugh and he still hadn't let the punchline land. The fortune teller lifted his knife high over Sochi's stomach as he plunged it straight down. Sochi's shirt ripped, but there was a loud snap of metal as the knife shattered. The fortune teller lifted the broken blade, and Maria could see the fortune teller's remaining eye in his hand. She had one shot at this. Maria tossed her rifle towards Buster, who grabbed it without looking up. Perfect. That bought her a few seconds. She pulled her sidearm up from her side, an old-fashioned 8-shot revolver, one of her first weapons and one often missed when people searched her. She had plenty of practice at the range, and she was able to take out targets as far as 20 meters away. The fortune teller was at least 30 meters away, and the eye was much smaller than any bullseye she had ever seen. Plus, there were much larger targets of her cousin and his wife lying there. All she could do was trust her own training, and trust that any tiny variations in her hand, the wind, or even the fortune teller's abilities could all be compensated for as she pulled the trigger. There was an explosion of blood and 3 distinct screams as the fortune teller clutched his newly injured arm, while Buster clutched at the bloodstains on his mask. They were no longer red, and they were now starting to turn brown and flake away as the blood died. What the hell? Why didn't I see it? Buster asked while Maria aimed her revolver towards him. The fortune teller has no ability to tell his own future. I figured you couldn't see what I was doing to him when you didn't intervene and save his first eye. You mentioned how you saw no version of the future where I was a threat to you? Let me try and change that for you, Maria said, firing her revolver where Buster stood, only to have him vanish into smoke before the bullet reached him. And already Maria could see 3 distinct smoke clouds form in front of her. Instead of focusing on those, she spun around, focusing behind her, where a new smoke cloud was forming. Aiming her revolver where his chest would be, she waited, and sure enough, Buster appeared, wielding a large axe, just as Maria pulled the trigger, sending a bullet through his chest. Buster fell to one knee, while black blood trickled out of his new wound in his chest. Ow, he croaked, while Maria held her revolver up to his temple. You already pulled that trick once. Rabid dogs don't do new tricks, Maria said as she pulled the trigger again. This time, there was a loud thud as the axe fell to the ground, along with the purple suit. Chuckle Buster was nowhere to be seen. No smoke was anywhere, and already Maria was trying to plot her new plan. If he's pulling a vanishing act, he isn't going to appear behind her again, especially since she called him out on predictability. His pride was going to push him to try something completely new now. Unfortunately, if clowns were good at anything, it was improvisation. Removing her spent round, she reloaded her 8-shot revolver as she made her way back towards Michikotl and Sochi. The fortune teller laid on the ground a few meters away, and judging by his lack of movement and the smell, he was well and truly dead. Maria crouched down and examined the locks. The chains, while being made of bone steel, the locks were cheap and likely just obtained from a gas station. so she could easily open it just by twisting it. But as Maria was stressing the lock, she felt the hairs on the back of her head stand up. She glanced out of the corner of her eyes without moving her head, and she could see Buster standing 50 meters away and holding a familiar weapon in his arms. Michikotl's crossbow aimed directly at her. Seeing him wield the crossbow, Maria knew that she was in deep danger with that weapon, but she also saw an opportunity. She would be playing a dangerous game, but it was a game she was very familiar with. Maria focused on the lock in front of her, twisting it, and sure enough, the lock popped off, so she moved on to the next lock, twisting it and stressing it, as she saw in the corner of her eye how uncomfortable Chuckle Buster was getting. It wasn't enough for him to simply kill her. No, he wanted the big show, the spotlight on him for the entire time, the audience knowing well and truly who was doing the killing. He wouldn't settle for being a side act anymore. So, the longer she pretended not to see him, the more angry he got, the more likely he was to do something stupid. Maria saw as he aimed the crossbow and he squeezed the trigger, as Maria felt the air whoosh by her cheek and the crossbow bolt sprout out of the cliff face in front of her, as Buster dropped the crossbow and howled in pain. Maria turned to face Buster, who was clutching at a fresh wound on his chest as he tried to hold it together, unaware that he was also bleeding from his back, from the perfect hole that led from his chest to his heart and out through his back. "You can't kill me. My contract with Caligula still stands. Judgment will never come for me, and Caligula can only torture me," Chuckle Buster said in a wet whisper, as Maria removed something from her pocket. She was sure she had some, and fortunately she did. Maria removed 2 copper centi from her pocket, which brought a hiss from Buster, as Maria reminded him of another part of his contract. The Treaty of Copper states that no staff of Caligula's Carnival of Cannibalistic Carnage shall perform any service for any member of the Hunters Guild, and that was most certainly a performance that I am freely paying for. "I hope that's enough for the ferryman," Maria said, dropping the 2 centi in front of him. As the coins dropped, so did the bronze mask, and for the first time in countless millennia, Chuckle Buster's face was exposed to the world. Buster's skin on his face had long since rotted away. His eyes were bared to the world, unable to close, as endless tears fell into the dirt, while his fingers scrabbled through the dirt, looking for the centi. His mouth had long since dried out, and his tongue was gangrenous and rotten. Parts of his skull gleamed through his bloody flesh, which was grosser than an anatomy doll. Anatomy dolls didn't have individual muscle fibers that relaxed and tensed in front of your eyes, and they didn't leak blood and pus in front of you. As Chuckle Buster finally grabbed the centi with his now red blood coating all the coins as his last breath escaped his lungs, Maria let out her own breath as she watched the rest of his black, corrupted blood turn red. She walked over to Michikotl and Sochi. This would require a lot of explanation, but she was confident they were going to get paid. The next day, Maria was in her home, while Michikotl and Sochi were recovering at their own home. They listened to her story about what happened, and Maria was now waiting for Pius to do his thing and mysteriously appear for his prize and the rest of her payment. Because him having a phone number for her to call would have been way too easy, and him appearing to help clean up the bodies would have been too much work for him, so Maria expected him at her home again. Unexpectedly, there was a knock. Maria looked through the people, and sure enough, it was Pius Poplicola. Maria could see that he had a big smile on his face, so odds are he was plotting another trick. But for now, he was doing what she asked, so she would play along. For now. Opening the door, she put her hand on her hip while she asked, "See, was that so hard?" "Yes, and yes. Do you have what I asked for?" Pius asked, getting to the point. Maria nodded and picked up the cooler filled with dry ice and the fortune teller's hands in a plastic bag. As we agreed, the fortune teller's hands, and as we agreed on, the rest of my payment, Maria said as she handed the cooler to the plutocrat, who peeked inside and nodded. It was what he wanted. "And for your payment," he said, stepping aside and showing piles upon piles of gold coins outside. It covered all of Maria's lawn, and how her neighbors didn't notice, she didn't want to know. And already Maria felt a sigh escape her lips. 200,000 auras. "You're more than welcome to count them to verify," Pius said with an even larger smile as his joke finally landed. "That's over 6 tons of gold," Maria said, while Pius smiled even wider. 6.25 tons, if you're using short tons. "You do realize it would be easier to pay us by check, and if you pay us by cash, I'm going to need the form ID'd." Before Maria could finish, Pius removed a form from his pocket and handed it to Maria, while she looked it over. Sure enough, it was a valid form, giving the identifying information of Pius Poplicola, how much he paid, and how much his income was. All quite delicious information. "Thank you, Mr. Poplicola. I'm sure the Revenue Service will be happy with this information come tax day," Maria said, holding the form, while Pius's smile immediately fell. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, I pay taxes every year, like most people. If you paid us by check, the taxes would only apply to that account because that's all they could trace. But since you were nice enough to pay us with specie, the Revenue Service of the 7 cities will definitely be interested in your finances. But I'm sure everything is on the up and up with your taxes, so no chances of you being audited," Maria said, while Poplicola started sucking on his teeth, and he looked like he was sucking on a lemon. "It's the Revenue Service. Soldiers, police, and even Metaman himself couldn't find us. Why would you think they would do any better?" "If you think you're untouchable, I'm sure you know better than me," Maria said with a shrug, which only brought down Poplicola's expression even more. Many who thought they were untouchable. Crime lord, celebrity, old money, cult leader, supervillains, and even members of the imperial family thought they couldn't be touched by anyone. But the Revenue Service was able to catch them and arrest them when no one else was able to. And Maria was willing to bet every single coin on her lawn that all of the plutocrats kept money outside of the Carnival also. And this was the empire of the 7 cities. Thieves were required to report stolen property and pay taxes on them. The Revenue Service wouldn't care about how supernatural Caligula's Carnival was. If there was money that they owed but didn't pay, they would pursue them through Pandemonium and LCL to get every coin earned. Pius grabbed the form from Maria and put it back in his pocket while he took out his checkbook and wrote it out for 200,000 auras. "Fine. I have decided this would be easier for everyone involved for me to just write out a check," he said as he tore off the check and handed it to Maria. In the memo, he wrote, "I hate you." "Thank you, plutocrat. Is there anything else I can help you with?" she asked while Pius sighed. "You'll get consequences for your arrogance someday," Pius said, about to turn away, but not before she called out after him. "No, I won't. I am your consequence. A reminder that you can't bully and bulldoze everything to go your way. Stay humble and treat the hunters as your equals. Do remember, it was Caligula who reached out to us for help, not the other way around," Maria called out as he walked away. The coins on her lawn vanished, but most of the grass was now dead. She sighed as she closed the door and got ready to deposit her check via her phone. This was a rough mission, but ultimately it worked out. Her hands were clean from the blood of the innocent, and everyone got out without any permanent harm. And they all got paid very well, which would help fund many more hunts. Maria smiled as the check was deposited and cleared, and now it would be time for her to figure out what to do for dinner.